This is the CUNYCast, smart voices, good stories, and thought-provoking conversation from the City University of New York. I'm Rick Firstman.
CUNY needed change in certain areas, that we weren't as good as we needed to be, and that we didn't also serve adults that well, and we needed to do better.
If you've been a CUNY faculty or staff member over the past few decades, there's a good chance you know John Mogulescu. If you're a CUNY student or graduate, there's an even better chance he's had an impact on your education and your life, even if you've never heard of him. John Mogulescu has been a CUNY leader for nearly 50 years, and it's hard to overstate the role he's played in the creation of many of the university's most innovative programs and schools of the past 2 decades. From the nationally acclaimed ASAP program to Gutman Community College, CUNY Start, the CUNY Service Corps, the CUNY Language Immersion Program, he oversaw the conception of these and many more as Senior University Dean of the Office of Academic Affairs. And in 2003, Dean Mogulescu founded the School of Professional Studies and built it from scratch into a school that has helped tens of thousands of working adults advance their careers or find new ones. Under his leadership, SPS created the first online programs at CUNY and is now recognized as one of the leading providers of online instruction in the nation, an expertise that played a critical role in CUNY's transition to distance education when the pandemic came a year ago. John announced his impending retirement a few weeks ago, and as Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez observed in sharing the news, in many ways John's is a quintessential CUNY story. His entire career has been driven by his passion for social justice, equity, and CUNY's mission of advancing education and opportunity for people of all backgrounds. I can't imagine a better example of living that mission, the Chancellor said. I sat down with John for a conversation about that life and about what it took to launch so many trailblazing initiatives that changed the lives of countless students and arguably changed CUNY too. Welcome to the CUNYcast, John, and congratulations on what I have to call a legendary career at CUNY.
Rick, you're too kind. It's great to be here with you. Obviously, I've had a long career at CUNY and almost 50 years, and I don't know, maybe it makes sense to start a little bit from the beginning, but you tell me.
Okay. Well, as you said, you've been at CUNY just about 50 years. Modern day CUNY really began 60 years ago, and you've been a really big part of the university for 50 of those years, which is really amazing. I imagine this is a kind of a bittersweet time for you.
It is. It is. You know, you kind of take a look at your own career and you have pride, and I feel that way, and I've been able to do a lot of things surrounded by wonderfully talented people who always make you look good. At the same time, you realize that this is kind of the end of your full-time engagement with the City University of New York. And you know, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do, but I think it is time for new leadership at the School of Professional Studies. It's time for me to, after a very long, hard year, to kind of step away for a bit and reflect a little bit about what I want to do with the rest of my life. So yes, weird is a good point, and you know, it's with mixed feelings, but with a sense that it's time.
Right. There are very few people with the kind of long perspective and experience that you have. And I'm wondering, you began way back in 1972. And if I were interviewing you then, and I said, tell me about CUNY, what would you have said?
When I started, I was actually a graduate student in social work who was doing my field placement at then New York City Community College, and knew about a few of the colleges, but only that this university was free, that a lot of people from my high school went to Brooklyn College. I went to Midwood High School in the city. If you go all the way back to 1972, I had just finished teaching 3 years of elementary school, public school, 6th grade in Fort Greene, and I must say I was there to learn about CUNY. I was young. I was idealistic. I wanted to change the world. But as far as what I never could have imagined at that time, what that beginning turned into, Rick, really.
Let's talk a little bit more about your early years and how you came to have this career and what inspired this mission you've been on. And I call it a mission because I think people who've worked with you through the years see it that way. Has it been a career that you envisioned in any way when you were young?
No, not even in the slightest. I did, when I went to graduate school, I was a psychology major in college. And then I went to social work graduate school thinking I was going to be some kind of clinician, some clinical social worker. But the times were very vibrant in the late 60s, early 70s.
And I have to just interrupt to point out that you were you went to college on a basketball scholarship.
Well,
correct?
I actually didn't go on a basketball scholarship because I went to an Ivy League school, Brown. They didn't have scholarships. They were based on need, and my parents were not needy. But I was a recruited athlete in both basketball and tennis. Yes, that's the truth. I was better in tennis. Basketball, I played 1 year freshman basketball. In tennis, though, I happened to turn into be the co-captain of Brown's team. So I was an athlete. I never thought I was a very good student. I didn't think I belonged in college, and particularly at that college. But and I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't a great student. So when I arrived at both teaching, which changed my life in a lot of ways too, just elementary school teaching. I was 22, the kids were 12, and almost all kids of color, black and brown, and I learned a lot about myself. And then I got this field placement my second year at NYU School of Social Work, and I met the dean of continuing education, was a former social worker organizer named Fanny Eisenstein, and she became my hero. She became my mentor. She was brilliant. She was smart. She had a sense of what you needed to do to change systems in New York. And she told me that my assignment for the year was going to be to go to the local prison, the local Brooklyn House of Detention down the street from then New York City Community College, and organize its first prison education program. And it was right after Attica. And I went down to that prison. I went in and I organized a literacy program and high school equivalency. And during that first year of a field placement, 3 days a week, I wrote a grant to the state ed department. And lo and behold, it was funded. And so I became the director. I stayed on after graduating from social work school and stayed on and stayed 3 years in that jail of 2,000 men, in which one of the floors was what we turned into and the system turned into a school floor. And we did this program for 3 years. Never would I have imagined, again, Rick, that start would have turned into anything that I planned.
What's the sort of connection to what you went on to do, creating all these programs, which we'll talk a little bit about more?
Well, it was a direct connection because I started in running this literacy program and high school equivalency program for people who were adults. They happened to be charged with crimes, but who didn't read and write very well and do math. And it was pretty clear to me after 3 years of public school teaching, in which I was teaching in a pretty well run school, but tracked school, that there were large numbers of people in the city of New York who didn't read and write and certainly not at the level that they needed to have successful careers. And they all happened to be at that time of color. And so it dramatically affected me. And I also realized that particularly at the jail, where I got to know people as individuals and always questioned, well, what was going on in their lives that caused them to be, to turn to crime, and at times violent crime. And also how do you prevent that in some way? I realized I was not interested in working with typical college students. I was interested in working with disadvantaged populations, and that the avenue of continuing education, the non-credit arm of CUNY, provided that opportunity. And so I started my career developing a host of programs, went from literacy to GED to second language to workforce development to training programs for all kinds of different populations. Then there was a new office in the central office of CUNY, and it was an office of continuing education. We were a small office of 7 or 8 people. The cornerstone of what we did was adult literacy, high school equivalency, second language, and we began to branch out into working with immigrants, working on issues of, actually there was a Reagan program for citizenship and making folks legal. I think it was called SLEAG at the time. And we started thinking, no one's paying any attention to us at CUNY. We're non-credit. We were supporting ourselves through grants and contracts. And the work was really interesting and dynamic. And every time we got an idea, we tried to build a program around it with an understanding that you can't have a great public urban university that doesn't pay attention to the needs of the city and where education and social policy interact. And we took that really seriously. And so for the first few years, we brought in people related to areas that were of need and interest in the city. So we started a program for out-of-school youth. It's called the Young Adult Learning Academy. It's actually called the Youth Internship Program to start. We began to think about people with disabilities. We expanded our second language programs. We dealt with workforce development. And for each of these, we interacted with city government. And we got money from the city or from foundations. And CUNY was going through a period of change as well, but continuing ed was never really thought of as, a priority. Every school had a program, some better than others, and I was the overall overseer of continuing ed for the university. And every time we got a new grant, we hired some new people. And so a lot of things began to mushroom and grow.
I should point out that in over the last 20 years or so, you developed $1.2 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in collaborative programs with the city and the state. In all those years in the Office of Academic Affairs, and you developed everything from ASAP to Gutman Community College, and of course the School of Professional Studies. So I wonder what the through line has been in terms of the context of the times.
That's a good question, Rick. And what happened was that the mayor of the city of New York in about, maybe 1996, 97, Rudy Giuliani, commissioned a group of people to take a look at CUNY. And from the outside, with an idea that we were not doing what we needed to do as a university. And in fact, Benno Schmidt was involved with that, who later became our board chair. And there were outside consultants from the Rand Corporation and from others. And they studied CUNY. And everybody, a lot of us, including me probably initially, we were very concerned that this was going to be kind of a hatchet job at the university. Turned out they came up with a plan called the CUNY an Institution Adrift with lots of recommendations. It led to a new chancellor coming in, Matt Goldstein. And I knew Chancellor Goldstein because he had been the head of the Research Foundation, and I had been responsible, together with my staff, of bringing in a lot of grant money. And Goldstein, one of the first things he did, he had a real vision. And he, said we're going to do away with remediation at the senior colleges and change the admission standards, but at the same time build up our relationship with the Department of Ed. And he turned to me to try and my unit to help figure that out. And we began then a real journey from that point on, 1999, 2000, 2001 to begin to think about how we could work to kind of change the way we did business, particularly at the community colleges, but also at the four-year colleges, with a goal to improving graduation rates and also a goal of starting some new schools. And during that period, and he was chancellor till about 2012, 2013, we had any number of new schools started. We had, as you said, Gutman, which is something that I did lead the team to build that school. We had the School of Journalism. We had a School of Public Health. We had Macaulay Honors College, with a sense that the university could even be better. And at the same time, we were getting closer with the Department of Ed, and there were increases in graduation rates at the Department of Ed, and that meant a logical increase at CUNY for our student population. And we began to grow as a university as students. At the same time, we thought about kind of seriously what we could do collectively to do better. And, you talked about ASAP as one example.
Mm-hmm.
ASAP is an interesting story. The chancellor had a meeting with the mayor. This was Mayor Bloomberg at the time. And he pitched that he would get higher graduation rates for community colleges. And our rates were really pretty low. They were 10, 11% three-year rates, and no different than many urban public community college universities and community college programs. He came back to the university. He said, I got $6.5 million, but we're going to have to do a pilot program to improve graduation rates. And we said, well, what did you say? And he said, we're going to get a 50% graduation rate. And of course, that, he plucked that number off the ceiling, but we put a small group of people together to figure out what could we do. And we got that money and we did a pilot for 1,100 people and we measured it from day one. And we kind of, looked not at instruction, but a whole bunch of things like going full time and getting your financial aid needs met, getting a Metro card, working in cohorts, limiting your choices by limiting majors, having very, very intrusive advisement. And 3 years later, the pilot programs at all of the community colleges averaged about 50%. And, the story then, and I'll quicken the story, is that we did get grant money from Gates and the Gates Foundation and the Robin Hood Foundation, and we began to expand. Now we've opened it up far more broadly for almost all students. At the same time, Rick, that we were doing that, we were strengthening our relationship with the public school system. We were expanding our College Now program, which provided opportunity for high school students to take college credit classes from 2 campuses to virtually every single campus. And working ultimately with over 20,000 high school students from the system who could take credits. And at the same time, the Gates Foundation approached us and said, we're interested in starting some early college high schools, which would enable you to actually get an associate degree or at least 30 credits while you're in high school. And ultimately, we started with 10 high schools working closely with the Department of Ed. And we added another 10, and we now have 20 early college high schools that we work with the Department of Ed. And those are feeders, as is College Now, into the university.
I wanted to talk a little bit about SPS, School of Professional Studies, and you've been the dean since its inception in 2003 and built it from nothing, right? What was the idea? How did that start?
Thank you for asking. I was about to get to that. Obviously, I think of that as probably my major accomplishment at the university. So in 2002, then Executive Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, Louise Mira, and I was by then the Senior University Dean for Academic Affairs, went to a conference on adult learners at Johns Hopkins. And on the train coming back, we were impressed with what's going on around the country. And Louise said, we need a school that would be different. Even though we serve adults at CUNY, we need a school that will be specific for adults, and I'm going to pitch it to Chancellor Goldstein. And she did. And he said, great idea. And he turned to me and he said, could you build a school that would be nimble and related to adults? And he didn't say much more. We didn't get any money. And we put a small planning team together of 4 or 5 people who largely were people who had worked with me in continuing education. And we thought about what a school might look like, and we were floundering a little bit. We were dealing with certificate programs, credit certificate. We didn't have any degree programs. And in 2004, then Executive Vice Chancellor Selma Botman, Louise had left to become head of the Historical Society, came to me and said, I need you to build CUNY's first online degree program because I can't get anyone to pay any attention to doing this. And, it was early on, but she said, I think we need it. And I have always liked to say yes to opportunity. And, if you look at the work in the central office, we pretty much always say yes. And just trying, even if we don't have the expertise. And we started with about, 260 students or so. We had our first degree program approved in 2006. In 2009, our first graduate. And over the next, from 2006 to now, 15 years, we built almost, I would say 27 or 28 degrees, half master's degree. And at the baccalaureate level, they were geared to adults who had started college but had not finished. And there are 800,000 of those New Yorkers. And we realized that we were onto something. And we built kind of a diverse group of programs based on what we thought were needs, in New York City that would have career opportunities as well. And some became large programs and some small. But we paid real careful attention to how you build online degree programs. And we became good at it. And as you probably know, the last couple of years, we've been ranked by U.S. News in the top 20 in the country. This past year, 8th in the United States out of 360 colleges and universities. And I understand the limitation of rankings, but it's better to be high than not. And we also, because of our interest and my interest in the non-credit side, we also created a professional education and workforce learning component and sector at SPS that now has generated over $30 million in funding per year. And we're probably, fourth or so of all of the campuses in grant dollars. And most of what we do on that side of the house is non-credit, is train workers. And last year we had opportunities for training close to 40,000 workers.
So how would you describe the impact you've had, at this point, as you said, 40,000 a year in these training programs, in addition to the degree programs and certificate programs? It's changed CUNY, I think, it's fair to say, in terms of that focus, but also the city. How do you assess the impact it's had on the city?
Let me start by saying it has helped build a relationship between CUNY and individual city agencies. And so when the city has a need, they come to CUNY and they realize that, and I go back to my time in the central office, that we can respond quickly and competently with quality programs to serve to serve the residents of this city. And that range of programs can be huge. So I think I mentioned to you, Rick, when we first spoke, we run a program in the Bronx for out-of-school youths in which we actually run our own school for young kids who left the public school system. At SPS, we have a very large program with Administration for Children's Services. It's called the Workforce Institute to provide training to juvenile justice and child welfare workers. We have a large program that we go and work with the workers who are in homeless shelters to try and find out, what we can do together to provide better services to folks. We work with the police department, after terrible incidents having to do with Abner Louima and Amadou Diallo in the late 90s related to looking at the training at the police academy. And I could go on and on. I'll give you one last example, which is in early childhood education. We were asked by a group of funders to create to take over, really, a professional development institute that would, look at the workforce in the area of early childhood.
As you talk about it, I'm really struck by how all of these programs they're providing opportunities for people in terms of careers, but also careers in areas that improve the city, that the people who live here can benefit from. So you're sort of contributing on both ends in that way.
I think that's true. And I think at SPS on the degree side, the first thing we're doing is trying to get people who haven't been able to get degrees, their college degree and a bachelor's degree. And these are workers, but they're generally working in relatively low wage jobs, other than our biggest program, which is nursing, which is actually for RNs to get them their BSN, but to provide greater career opportunity. That is correct. And on the grant side, we're dealing largely with incumbent workers, but to try and provide either skills that will let them do their jobs better, enable them to do their jobs better, or in fact will lead to new opportunity. And, as I said, that when you look at the relationship between CUNY and the city, who else should do this kind of training? It is clear that, to me, and it always has been, that CUNY is the entity, and we kind of, both at Central and SPS, I believe, work kind of the innovative arm of the university. Now, that doesn't mean that every other campus doesn't do interesting and exciting work, and they do. But it is also interesting that a lot of the programs that you mentioned, kind of came from really good idea people that looked at things and said, status quo, not good.
Well, in this whirlwind of accomplishment, you almost kind of went past the online programs.
I'll circle back.
Too quickly. I mean, that is prescient. I mean, starting so far back 15 years ago or so, and then it's kind of fitting that this year, obviously, it's become, this was the year that it all kind of came to fruition. And in fact, the school developed workshops for CUNY faculty. I think you had 3,000 or so faculty.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about that. When COVID hit, we had been doing online instruction for 13 years or so. And the university said, could you put together a course that would enable faculty to get, some training to do online instruction? And I think we called it Online Teaching Essentials, OTE. And over the last year, we have had now, I think, 6 cohorts of faculty, and about 2,600 faculty or so have taken this course. To turn this university around overnight, particularly for faculty who had not had any experience in teaching online, it was fortuitous that we were around. we were a whole school that was based on this, and we had paid a lot of attention as to what you need to both train students to take online classes. We have a wonderful student orientation, and to train faculty as well. And I think we've done that, not perfectly, but pretty darn good.
Well, it's clearly a big part of the future, and the chancellor has been talking about using what we've learned this year to incorporate it in, even as we try to get back to normal and go back to campus, that the online programs are gonna be there.
I think it's pretty clear that even students who want to come back in person are going to say, well, maybe I can take one of my courses online, or maybe I can, instead of going to school 3 days a week, I can only go 2. And also, the world around us is changing. And so I think it will be essential for CUNY to compete for students, to provide the greatest flexibility of offerings that we possibly can. And I think also the question of whether you can do certain things online, there are certain things perhaps that you can't, but now because technology being so good, there are lots of things you can do, and you can simulate and provide opportunity for students that you really almost can't do in person.
When you stepped down from your central office role a year ago to spend your last year focusing on SPS, there was a wonderful tribute video put together, which I've seen and which I'm going to put on the episode page. And one of the things I learned from that video was how you're viewed by your colleagues as the founding father of many of the best things CUNY has ever done. And you're sort of famous for action and results and plowing through obstacles. And I think Rachel Stevenson said you have little patience for process that gets in the way. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit in terms of the challenges you've faced in creating and launching all these new ideas at such a large and complex institution.
Well, I've had a bunch of challenges, and I always say that higher ed is filled with incredibly progressive thinking and smart people, but also very resistant to change. And so just to start, real system change is hard to do. And there are a number of things that have to happen. One, you have to have a chancellor who has a vision and also will let you fail, so that you will be able to start things and hopefully succeed. But if you don't, that's okay. You'll go on to something else. And second, to have your back when there are things that seem to be working, but there are people who oppose them. And all of the major projects the most major that we've done have been opposed by certain factions of this university. And, that could be ASAP, that could be Gutman, that could be SPS, that could be CUNY Start. There was not unanimous glee at changing the systems that were in place that to me needed some degree of changing. And I always felt that the chancellors that I worked with, one, had my back, and so that you were able to feel comfortable and confident that if you were criticized, that you wouldn't fold and you wouldn't have to, stop what you were doing. And that's hugely important. Second, we took great pride in trying to measure most of the things that we did. And even that can be controversial. And so whether it be ASAP or CUNY Start or Gutman or looking at graduation rates, I know that when we first did ASAP, I went around and we met with groups of faculty and staff and people were very concerned about bringing in this new program that came with money, just give us the money and not the program. And I would always ask them, did they know what the graduation rates were at their particular college? And some did, some didn't. But, and they also didn't know who we were and to the group of people that we were. I mean, I always thought that we shared common values with folks about serving poor people, serving people who were educationally disadvantaged, serving folks of color, serving people on welfare, on public assistance, and people in jail and people coming out of jail. And I think people who were easily critical of us didn't want to hear that. And so we had to overcome that. And we did that, I think, by having pretty thick skin and also kind of being willing to say, look at our results. Obviously, I admire faculty and clearly know that faculty drive this university, but I also at the same time understood that CUNY needed change in certain areas, that we weren't as good as we needed to be, and that we didn't also serve adults that well, and we needed to do better. And so, I looked at all of that, and we surrounded ourselves with people who had kind of similar values, and because a lot of us were on grants for most of the time until Chancellor Goldstein recognized that we knew what we were doing. And when you think about all of the people that we developed who have gone on, the woman who ran our public school stuff is now the head of the Petrie Foundation. The woman, the deputy for me, is now at Tulane. Donna Lindemann is now the associate vice chancellor of the university. Sherry Cleary is a university dean. John Garvey became university dean. Bill Ebenstein, university dean. All of these people that started in kind of the non-credit area were recognized because they were incredibly talented. And it's to CUNY's credit, I think, that people were recognized. And then at SPS, we tried to do similar things. And we developed degree programs that didn't exist. And we have the Masters in Museum Studies with the New York Historical Society. We have 3 degree programs in the area of disability studies, some of the only ones in the entire country. We have a youth studies master's program that is different and innovative. And you know how hard it is to build even 1 degree. And we average building 2 new degrees every year for 12 years. So, and I'm not process oriented. That's true. I'm not a great long range strategic thinker. I'm impatient. I kind of want to go forward with ideas and try and move, forward. And, sometimes that's no good. And people know I'm a huge nudge and I like to start meetings on time and I'm a bug about returning emails the same day you get them. Things that I think are important. And the funders that fund us, public and private, know that this is what they're going to get. And so they keep coming back to us because, in fact, we will be accountable, we will be, serious, and we're generally pretty good at putting programs together. Going back to 50 years ago in 1972, you asked me what I knew about CUNY. No, I didn't know anything. But I knew that I wanted an interesting career. And I am also someone who's a worrier to fault and insecure in lots of ways. And so I pinch myself that I've had this opportunity and I couldn't make it up. I just couldn't. And I've met incredible people, both inside CUNY and outside. And this university is an amazing place. It drives the economy of this city. It doesn't get enough credit. It doesn't get enough funding. but it does unbelievable work. And now with COVID, and hopefully COVID recovering, will change again for the better, and continue to be that vehicle that leads from, you know, a low wage to a middle class life. And you know, Roz Chetty says that, but our work is about larger than small numbers, you know, and this whole question of career and career opportunity, the work that Angie Kamath has done, you know, incredibly gifted person in that area. Unfortunately, we're losing her to NYU School of Professional Studies, another success story in some ways as the new dean of that school. But you know, I think we have changed CUNY and the city. I really believe that. And the ideas have come from everyone around, you know, and we don't stand on ceremony. Almost none of them are mine. I mean, I'm good at getting things through and building, you know, but the people who came with ideas are so valuable. It's who I look for when I hire. It's you know, you want passion, you want you know, enthusiasm, but you want people who are smart and want to try to do new things and always say yes. And I go back to Fanny Eisenstein, you know, my hero, and you know, I used to watch her talk, and she was this fiery, you know, brilliant, you know, person, public speaker that was amazing and unassuming at the same time. And, you know, she kind of adopted me, and anyone who has been touched by her realized that the world in the city needed changing, and we couldn't do it all, but we wanted to do our part. And so I'm going to miss it. And for sure, I think that CUNY will go on and do great. And once your time is up, it's up. And I understand that, and I'll move on, and we will continue to do great things and hopefully provide opportunities through terrific leadership and talented faculty and staff who can continue to change this university. I've never believed in the status quo. I think that's just boring. And you have to do it well. You really do. There are things you have to do well. You have to balance your budget. You have to, you know, be careful in every system that you work with, whether it's registration or admissions, and you have to be customer friendly. I think you will find at SPS that we return phone calls and emails, and we are attentive to solving problems, and I just believe in that. And if a student gets to me or anybody else with a problem, we address it immediately, and we do our very, very best. I wish sometimes the outside world would understand what I say when I say, you don't need to give your money to Columbia and Harvard and Brown. They don't need your money. And even if you went there, and CUNY does, because our students need scholarships, they need opportunity, and they're every bit as talented and good, and so many of them are first generation students, and you know, all the things that we continually talk about.
Well, all well said. There are so many lessons for everybody that you're leaving behind. CUNY is much better for your 50 years, and congratulations again. I want to thank you for coming on and talking about this marvelous career you've had, and I want to wish you the best in your post-CUNY life.
Thank you very much, Rick.